So
not
it's not
moving.
just a matter of
Everybody
saying,
ready?
okay, no,
I'm
Yeah.
gonna hit the live
Go to
button.
that.
right now.
Amy, are we live?
How are you?
Oh, okay.
That's
I've
important.
done some of that. Forgotten it.
Right on time.
Good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock. It is Thursday, October the 12th, and this is the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting. I'd like to call it to order. I'd also like to mention that the public and the press have been notified about this meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. So on our agenda for today, just a second here. So on our agenda for today, let's see, let me borrow
There you
yours
go.
just for a second. I printed out the wrong thing. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, and wanted to see if anybody had any additions or corrections to the minutes.
I move the minutes be
Oh,
approved.
hold on, I did
Oh,
have a
sorry.
couple, yeah, sorry. I had a couple. One was on page 2, it talks about, it's in the second line under litter. It talks about his staff has had difficulty entering the canisters in a timely manner. I thought it should be emptying, yeah. And then on the first page, there are some initials that are used, MOU. And it's that memorandum of understanding, and I thought maybe that should be written out first, and then have the MOU in parentheses, just to make sure that that was clear. And that was it. So, nothing else? Okay. Yes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move the minutes be approved as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay. I don't believe we have any citizens' comments. I was not aware of, or I had some communication with one individual. I encouraged them to come, but I don't see them here, so. We will move on to old business, and the first item under old business is water quality.
Doug, you wanna
Sure.
give this one?
Yeah, and I have actually, let me give you this, Douglas. So what I did is, we started with when we first started the subcommittee for water, we had this huge, declaration of ideological, beautiful things to do with water. But as we've gone through over the last year and a half, we kind of netted it down to 4 proposed things we want to work on, 23, 24. So I think we talked a little bit about this last time, but the water inflows and outflows, understanding the different inflow and outflow of water and the quality of that water across the island. The coliform contamination, we know we saw high coliform contamination. Sandra brought up again that study, Douglas, that was done about 20 years ago. If there's any, is there a report from that you might have?
Just the PowerPoint. which-
Can you circulate that again?
Yep.
So we'll take a look at that, but that's the idea of understanding, if we can understand, is there a bifurcation of animal fecal coliforms are bacteria that are used as indicators that you've got fecal contamination from humans or from mammals. But there is, so the question now is, we've got very high fecal coliforms in the initial samples we took, which indicates that there are indicators that there is a lot of fecal matter in the water going out, which is not good. But what we're not sure of is what's animal versus what's human. So the idea is, let's go back and look at what we did 20 years ago. And then as we move into part of 1 and 2, which is taking some samples from the outfalls, seeing if we can do the tests that will help us better understand which might be from animal and which might be from human. And in that case, we can understand, have a little better understanding of cause and effect, so to speak. The third item here is the septic systems, which what we talked about was starting with a small step, which is understanding what our septic system requirements are, and then perhaps recommending some inspections and certifications periodically. So at least we know the septic systems are functioning well before we just make recommendations that all septics need to be ripped out and we need to spend $100 million, which has never happened. So that's part of that. And then the last item is about PFAS, these new emerging contaminants. And the regulations, we're moving into an election year. The regulations are kind of stuck with EPA right now, but, DHEC's watching it, and everyone's kind of watching where PFAS is going. And the recommended, what they call maximum contaminant levels for PFAS was 4 parts per trillion. If you can imagine one orange ping pong ball in a sea of a trillion of them. But they said it's about 4 parts per trillion. What we've seen is the water that's coming in from Charleston Water is between 3 and 5. So the water coming in from Charleston may not be in compliance with PFAS. The other thing is that, as we've talked about, is PFAS is on nonstick cookware, so it's been used over, the islands, it's been used over the last 40 years, so it's going to be in the septics, it's going to be everywhere. So the idea is getting ahead of what the risk and what the potential impact could be to the residents and the water. So those were the 4 items that we really were going to put our energy to. So the idea was to come to here, share it with everybody, and then, I don't know if it goes to a vote or what we do, but that's kind of what we wanted to focus on as the water subcommittee. Now, the second document is a rough, high-level plan for accomplishing, I would say, 1 and 2, and leading, and contributing to 3 and 4. So this is sort of the activity, obtain the maps, which actually have all the maps. Douglas, I met with Chris Jordan, and Chris had just happened to be pulling maps together for Jan Anderson that shows septic versus the, where the pump stations are, the grinder stations, so he made copies for us.
Good.
So we have that.
Okay, so the first item on
The
your-
first item is pretty much done.
We could check.
Yeah, we can
That's
check
what
that one
you
off.
always do when making a list, make item number 1.
Well, that's the
make a
thing, you'll
list.
see, I have to finish building out the plan, but what we're trying to get to, and what I think we want to get to for next month is defining, is there a dollar amount that we're going to need to execute this? And if so, then what is that dollar amount, so we can make a recommendation, a request to the city council to support that plan. So right now, with all the diagrams I have now, we should be able to go through and complete, let's say item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get down to 5, which will then give us the ability, which is the prioritized sample locations. That'll give us the ability to define the sample locations, the sample parameters, come up with a cost estimate. And then the only thing we'd have to do is, if it doesn't cost anything, it might just be who's going to volunteer to slog around in a swale in the middle of a rainstorm. But if it is going to cost anything, then what we'll do is we'll bring the estimates back to the November meeting, hopefully, and we'll see if we can make a request for funding. I'm estimating if we do just indicator parameters, it's probably going to be anywhere from $80 to maybe $120 per location, because these general water quality parameters like coliforms and suspended solids and biochemical oxygen are generally low-cost wet chemistry procedures, so they're not real expensive. Of course, something like PFAS could cost hundreds of dollars per sample.
So the 120 is for what now?
I'm estimating per sample location. So if we say there's 4 or 5 outfalls we want to sample, then rough estimate, it could be anywhere from $350 to say to $700 or $300 to $600 for the total sampling effort. So I'm just giving an idea.
So the 120 is, does that include the PFAS or no?
That would not include PFAS.
Okay.
And I think we also.
So that's addition to that?
Yeah, and I think we said right now, what we talked about was we weren't going to do PFAS on the stormwater samples and the running samples. The PFAS, we were going to focus on working with the Isle of Palms Water and Sewer on the effluent coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, the PFAS in the drinking water, and PFAS in the biosolids, but let them do the sampling and let Charleston do the sampling and provide us the data.
So the PFAS is that like, did you say 400?
That could be several hundred, even more dollars, yeah, per sample.
Because you said that the total would be about 600, you thought?
If we just do the indicator parameters focused on fecal coliform and the basic water quality indicators, it could be, we're looking probably somewhere, let's just say $500 to $1,000 for the whole sampling project, roughly. If we add PFAS to it, we're going to move into the several $1,000s. And I think
Okay.
we did discuss this once before, Douglas. I think maybe we did it as a subcommittee. We brought in, we got some numbers on what it costs to do PFAS, and it took us to like an $8,000 to $12,000 project, which Douglas.
And that's per sample?
Okay, let me slow down.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm trying not to talk, we're trying to stay on that. So let's just say per sample location, we want to do, say, 3 or 4 parameters,
Yes.
not including PFAS.
Gotcha.
Those 3 or 4 parameters will roughly cost somewhere in aggregate, I'm guessing, between $75 and $150.
Okay, got it.
All right, so that'll be 3 or 4, and each one will be somewhere between $25 and $40, I think,
Okay.
per analysis. So that puts us between 75 and 150. So if we just say, for instance, let's say we have 10, just to make a round numbers. If we had 10 sample locations, then we're looking at somewhere between $750 to $1,500 in total to do the sampling event. Not including, that's only for analysis and results. That's not including any labor to collect the samples and anything else that we might need. If we add PFAS to it, PFAS could be anywhere from $250 to $500 per sample. So if you had 10 sample locations, you'd be looking at an additional $2,500 to perhaps $5,000 to do the event. And then Douglas, if we do the math, that you can see that takes us to about that 7,500 to 10,000 or more that we originally came up with if we tried to do something comprehensive.
Okay.
Does that help, Sandra?
Yeah, and so this would be 10 to 15 areas that would be
Yeah, if you look
sampled,
at the
is that
sewer
right?
maps, if you look
Yeah.
at the sewer maps or the drainage maps.
Right.
There are certain locations where the water converges
Yeah.
and confluent into a point where different spots along the island, it's going to go out into
Right.
the water. So we would go to those locations. I'm still looking at the maps, and I might need some help, Douglas, from somebody, but we're identifying which of all those outfalls we want to sample.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we wanted to look at was the total number of them, and then if it's a large number, and I'm not quite sure what it would, then we might look at the septic maps to try to pinpoint whether we think there might be more of what we would call a hot spot, where we think there might be more likely contamination, and we'll just reduce the number down to those areas.
Okay. So for
I'll
the,
slow down and open it up.
no, for the
more questions.
PFAS in drinking water, that's not really something that we have much control over, correct?
That is, we do not have control over that. And in speaking with Chris Jordan, our deep wells, I don't think they've seen or tested, they're pulling water from 2,000 feet below surface. So we don't expect PFAS, and I can't recall whether he said they collected samples, but the city of Charleston, though, we did get results from them, and we are seeing, so the makeup water that comes in, I think the water and sewer provides, I think, about 25 to 33% of the water, and Charleston provides, or a third, 2/3, something like that. But Charleston's water coming in does have detectable PFAS in it. So we've seen it at around, right, dancing around the proposed regulatory limit by the
Right.
United States Environmental Protection Agency.
Doug, I have a question. PFAS, even if you use reverse osmosis water, which I know we can't all get in our faucets, and water filters in refrigerators and the ones that they sell, do they have any effect on PFAS?
Yeah, they do. They will absorb it. So a lot of the filters that you see in coffee makers and the Britas, it's generally a charcoal or coconut type filter that you will absorb the PFAS molecules generally. So what you don't know is, when you get breakthrough on those, like when is it that you've used up all the filter material? They do have reverse osmosis over for the wells. So Chris is, he feels strongly that if we did have any PFAS, that we would take it out in reverse osmosis. The question you get into there, though, is in reverse osmosis, you create a reject water, and that reject water is going to be very high concentrations because you've taken all that mass of PFAS and put it into a much smaller amount of water. So the question is then, okay, what can we do with the reject? Which is the same thing that when you look at the wastewater treatment plant, PFAS will concentrate in the biosolids. So what do we do with the biosolids? But I think Charleston water systems and Isle of Palm Water and Sewer are going to be responsible more for the PFAS. Where for us, the bigger issue, I think, is any PFAS that's coming out of septic systems and from use by residents. That's the other. We identified 4 risk points. One is what the residents are doing, going into their own personal septic systems, the water coming in from Charleston, the water that goes out in through the effluent at the wastewater treatment plant, and then the biosolids that are they take all the solids after treatment, they concentrate them, take the water out, but there could be PFAS in those. So those were the 4 risk points for PFAS that we identified. The 3 of them are somewhat controllable because they're what we call point source. You can pinpoint exactly where they are. The one that's a bigger challenge is if we do have ubiquitous or prolific PFAS contamination from the septic systems, that's a whole other
It's a
thing.
big,
I hope that helps. to answer your question.
So when you say septic systems, that would you be able to capture that information from, like runoff or that kind of thing?
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we believe that the septic systems are discharging out into the swales or into the water that eventually goes off as stormwater runoff, then yeah, we could detect it. Now, I don't think, Douglas, there's any shallow wells in use on the island, or is there anybody who's using any more, like irrigation
I
or
don't know.
landscaping wells?
A lot of landscaping wells, for sure.
Yeah,
I
'cause-
don't think that there are any, there may be one or two that are using it for drinking water, but I think it's pretty,
Yeah, so
few.
if there were wells that were down, drilled into more shallow aquifer, which, maybe it's 25, 30, 40, those could potentially be contaminated because that's the area where, we've got very sandy, low organic content soil, so you're going to get that material going down.
I have a question regarding goal number 4. So in contrast to the testing, is there anything that as residents we can do to kind of advertise what to avoid that could lead to an overabundance in PFAS in our water
Yeah,
systems?
there is. We could, EPA and even DHEC may have its own version, but there are guides out there that tell you, get rid of all your Teflon pans.
Okay.
So that we can get some of the documentation, and we could potentially, or we could put that out or make it available to the residents.
Right.
So, because it's a personal health thing too,
Mm-hmm.
I still have 2 Teflon pans where, I gotta get rid of them, but, but
So I belong to a group, an environmental working group, and they actually have a PFAS map where they have
was that
tested.
EWG? The
Yeah.
one that, what's
Yes.
his name, the actor?
I don't know about the actor, but they have a map, and
Mm-hmm.
they show Charleston's drinking water being above acceptable levels.
Yeah.
And then they have all kinds of information, everything you'd want to know about what kind of filters to use, what kind of products, it's pretty much in everything.
Yeah, the environmental working group has done a really, really good job. I'm trying
But
to
it's
think.
very comprehensive.
Who's the guy that played the Hulk? Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo is very much involved with the environmental working.
I couldn't have come up with that name if you paid me.
Yeah, but Mark Ruffalo has been involved, he's been involved and been sort of just like Matt Damon has been involved with water.org and water
Yeah,
equity.
okay.
So, yeah, the environmental working group has a lot of information and packets as well. And I circulated, if you remember, some things initially, they talked about PFAS in 4 different ways.
Yep.
So we can do that. I
Yeah,
think that's a good
If I wanted to go
idea.
home tonight and look up this comprehensive list,
I
how
can
would,
send you an email, and you can just connect with this group if you
Okay,
want. And then I just
okay.
get emails
Yeah.
Yeah, if you type in
daily.
Share it with all of us.
EWG,
Yeah.
just type in
Okay.
EWG
Yeah.
PFAS, you'll probably go right to the site.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they have gone out and consolidated all the public data I think that they could scrape and crawl off the internet.
Yeah.
And they've put it on a geographic information system map, and you can see little
Yeah.
dots. Now, the
Yeah.
one thing I will just caution you is, you're going to see a lot of dots, particularly in the west and the east and around major cities, that they've done a lot more sampling. So it's probably going to be more dots as we go forward, but it looks concentrated right now because some cities and areas have done more sampling than others. So
And
you
they
have to-
also, they just updated the map to show wildlife being affected by PFAS, and then in particular
Yeah.
endangered
Yeah,
species.
it's in the food
So,
cycle. If you.
It's a lot, it's a
Yeah,
lot
I'm happy, maybe,
to
you know,
comprehend.
yeah, and I don't want to take up too much time on this, but we can do another informational session if we wanted to. And perhaps, and I think we talked about this, maybe we make a recommendation where we do the informational session to the city council to make them, to educate them and make them aware of this, give them a little basis and background in the science and policy that's going on, so they can be prepared if there are things that are going to come up in the future. I think that might be good. And then what we could do is potentially look for support from them to do some of these, call them promotional or public outreach campaigns to help people understand how they can start to eliminate some of the PFAS sources that are for their body as well as the water system.
The website, the South Carolina DHEC website, has a lot of really good information about products that contain PFAS and talks about why it's important, why were they developed, and that sort of thing. But anyway, it's a good website to give you sort of an overview of things you need to be looking for.
I'll put-
Dental flosses, it could be
Yeah.
things even as simple as like dental floss.
Yeah, what I can do is I'll put together several different, a list of URLs and just circulate them, get them circulated to everybody. But in the meantime, there's a lot, and it's much more complex than some of the previous issues we had with what they call methyl butyl ether, which was what they were putting in unleaded gasoline, and DDT and parathion and all these others, because it's such a ubiquitously used chemical. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, so
Doug, I wanted to ask you, should there be an additional bullet there regarding public education?
yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we should add a fifth item there with both public and education of the council to bring everyone up to a certain foundational level of the issue and what might be coming. So we can do that.
Okay.
I will say, I feel like I can speak for a lot of people. If I wasn't a part of this group, I probably would not have known about PFAS, and I feel like a lot of people could say the same. So I definitely think what you're doing and what you're trying to do with public outreach would be important.
Okay, that's great input.
I mean, it's kind of an emerging thing, though, right?
It is
In that we're kind of all learning about it at the same time, and I guess my takeaway from the health department folks were the professionals are not crystal clear on the threats. and
No,
The
we're-
amounts and what's
No,
acceptable and what's
I've been
not.
working for the last 3 years, I've been working with some of the most knowledgeable people in the environmental consulting industry on this, PhD chemists, toxicologists. We've listened to experts up at DHEC, and there's debates of whether there's 4,000 or 9,000 different compounds that could fall under this moniker of PFAS. So EPA is even having a hard time defining which. The regulations right now are only for two specific, what they call PFOS and there's another one, PFOA. But that's two out of, say there's 9,000. Okay, what do we do about the other 8,998? So there's a lot of, there's a lot going on in this, and the science is still evolving. But it's moving into, the early mainstream in terms of discussion. And depending on what happens what EPA winds up doing with these maximum contaminant levels under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and what they wind up doing finally on the designation for hazardous waste, will determine, what actions people have to take. So folks like the IOP Water and Sewer are waiting for direction. Like, they don't want to, where do we go? Because then you could take an action based on today, and it's not what the regulators are going to require tomorrow. So a lot of organizations are focusing on outreach, education, and learning and understanding and following the regulatory trends, so they're prepared, and even maybe perhaps even going as far as putting a plan together and understanding what might need to be done, but not executing on it yet until they're sure what the regulations are.
So I have one question for Douglas. The study that was done looking at E. coli bacteria, and then with that E. coli bacteria, defining what type of
Right.
source it was
Right.
from, whether it
Right.
was from an animal, a bird, or human waste, or what have you. That was done in 2003. Was that done with grant money, or?
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
Uh-huh.
Yep, there was a specific grant at that time for that project that the city was able to secure, and it paid for that testing. And it was kind of a twofold project. There was the first pass of, do you have a coli and then there was the second phase of it, which was doing that
identify.
DNA identification as to what the source was for each of the, kind of what was making up that E. coli.
So has anything else been done in the last 20 years
No.
to look at the specific sources?
No, I mean, I think that would probably be this same testing regimen that we would go through. And we have been talking, when we talk to the labs about doing that, it's still, it is a more expensive level of testing. I think it's cheaper now than it was 20 years ago, but it's still costly. But I think it would be a logical next step of testing.
Yeah, are there grant monies for that?
I know that it was a thing that was 20 years ago. It was widely available. I haven't heard that it is. I I haven't specifically heard that it is today, but it does seem like there's generally a lot of grant money, so it could very well be.
One of our strategies is,
I could look into that.
yeah, one of the strategies, Sandra, was to look at, if it is from human, it could be from septic, and with some of the activities going up at the Grand Strand on the septic activities and at DHEC, perhaps if DHEC is starting to look at this as a priority, maybe there could be some
Right.
funding coming down.
Well, and that's
So
why,
we can
yeah.
add another one to this, is
Yeah.
look for grants to support these programs.
And that's why I asked the question, because it seems to be something we hear about in the news pretty regularly. From Somerville to Mount Pleasant to Myrtle Beach to Allendale. I mean, it seems to be something that is under consideration in lots of areas and lots of concerns about contamination. So I thought maybe that there might be some opportunities for grants.
I would guess there is. You will recall meeting with the Waterkeepers Group, Andrew Wonderly, who was super plugged into, he was really kind of in on the ground level of that.
Was that at that conference?
Well, he came here as well, or maybe he may have just met specifically with the water group, but we've had a long-going dialogue with him. Did he not come to the whole group?
No.
No, he can't.
Okay, so he just came to the water group.
And I think we had a couple
spoke
of
to him.
follow-up conference calls
Yeah,
once.
we've had a number of interactions with him. We asked him, because his group is doing that testing for troubled waterways.
Right.
He told us, and I guess this is good news for us to some extent, that they generally tested the entire county periodically, and they kind of watched DHEC's testing, and they kept an eye on testing, but they did not start in on their own testing, frequent testing, unless they saw some triggers that indicated there were problems that they wanted to better understand. So kind of good news, bad news, he was saying your water is clean enough currently that it's not drawing our attention, so we're not gonna, it wouldn't be in their interest to expend the effort to test behind our island. So I guess that was good news, but we have talked to them about just us doing it independently and kind of using them as a resource, which they were completely agreeable to, and kind of said if you could get us, they have a day of the week that they gather samples, take them to the labs, and they certainly have shown a willingness to help us any way they could. They just didn't want to, and it also sounded like a geographic challenge. I think all of their testing, and they're in a boat running around selecting samples, and it would be a challenge to come all the way out to get one to meet their laboratory deadline at the kind of lunchtime hour. But if we got it to them, they could do it for us.
Okay. Good, thank you. Anything else on water quality? Any other questions for Doug? Okay. Let's move on to climate action. I don't know if we have anything to report on that, since Belvin
don't.
wasn't able to be here.
Belvin sent a note back saying that he will be here at the next meeting, and he's going to discuss the EV, whatever the EV item was, the electric vehicle
Right.
item. I think it was looking at maybe electric vehicles in the fleet
Yep.
here.
And retrofitting City Hall, that's still kind of an ongoing project. We have been selecting a designer and a builder to renovate this building. In the kind of request, it's been pointed out that we wanted to analyze and look into what it would take to kind of make this building more environmentally friendly. What would be the cost-benefit analysis of that? And that's something that team will report to council on. If you want to, and Belvin talks about it, kind of making a statement. I mean, it may be that you just want to make a statement with your facility. Might not be a huge payback or a cost benefit to you, but you may choose to do it just to make the statement to the community and be seen as a leader in the community. So they're gonna be helping us with that for this renovation specifically.
Would it help to have a resolution or a recommendation or some form of communication with the city council about this, that this committee encourages just what you said, maybe not a big payoff in dollars and cents, but certainly help in our leadership and our goals for being an environmentally responsible community.
I mean, I do think that this group kind of, as a advisory group, that would certainly help. I think that, I don't think it could hurt. I think that it would be probably most useful when we know kind of the cost and the benefit and kind of the choices of things that could,
Well, but in learning some of the
Specifics.
costs, wouldn't, I mean, in order to compare costs, wouldn't some of the environmentally appropriate options need to be considered at that point?
Yes.
So it's not strictly a cost decision. Okay, would you inform this committee when you think it's appropriate?
yes.
Because we're an advisory committee, and it seems like that would be a good
Absolutely.
bit of advice for the city
Absolutely.
council.
Yeah, I foresee that the engineering and architecture firm that's chosen, and this is just an example, I don't know if this would be realistic or not, but that they would say, you know, the cost of installing solar panels on the roof, for example, would be this. The benefit over the long term would be this. An alternative would be, you know, wind turbines in the corner. That would cost this, that would. So I think there's going to be kind of a menu of
Okay,
options.
and so the engineers and designers would include environmentally friendly options as part
Correct.
of their report.
And I think that's going to
Okay.
create a menu of cost and benefit for consideration. I think that would be something that this group would want to look at and have an opinion on.
Great.
And it might be that it's expensive, but it sends a good message, or it pays for itself over the long run, so it's a financially sound decision to make. But I think the group, to make an informed kind of recommendation, would need that information from my perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just pulled up Belvin's email, and he said, I'll have EV fleet information ready for presentation at the next meeting. So maybe,
Okay. All right, let's move on to wildlife, and it looks like the first item is discussion of native plant exhibit and classes. Deb, did you want to just kind of summarize where we are with that?
Yes, so I made arrangements with Charlene Johnson with Plants for the People to present at our next meeting, November 9th. And it will be a brief presentation, just basically so we can meet her, she can introduce herself and give you a better idea than I can of what she'll be doing for us. But to summarize just very briefly, in talking about the triangle at 7th Avenue, she said that because it's about 2/10 of an acre, I sent her the tax plat, and she said she would probably start with a corner and kind of see how things grow there, you know? She's concerned about salt water and different things that are just, she knows about that I don't. So I think she'll give us a better idea when she comes and presents. And she said she charges $30 an hour to design and install. And she will do a presentation in February at the rec center for $100.
it's pretty.
Or maybe more than one.
Maybe more than one,
It
yeah.
just depends on what she decides is
Yeah,
best.
and then Mary went to her presentation last
Yeah.
night on James Island, so she can probably speak
Yeah.
to this
It
even
was-
more.
I wanted to see how she presented it, and it was at the Audubon local chapter meeting, and I was so impressed with her. I think we've got the right person.
Good.
She was interesting and engaging, and people really were entertained and very well educated.
Yeah.
I learned a whole lot. I wanted to take notes, but she said, you don't have to take notes, I'll send you a PDF of everything. And I learned a lot, and I talked to her, she wants to come and meet with me at 1:30 on the
Right.
9th and go to the Triangle, and I thought maybe I'd take her over to Carmen Bunch Park too, to see if she,
Yeah.
just what her opinion was, of which would be the better. She wanted to come to my garden and
Yeah.
see all my messy plants, and she,
So,
think-
yeah, she's going to come that Thursday, meet with Mary for the
Yeah.
afternoon, and then come
for
to the meeting.
afternoon. So I'd almost like for her to come sooner so that she can be more prepared to say to give us advice that night. And I'll ask her, I know she's coming to the Isle of Palms Farmers Market
Next week.
next week, but I don't know, I know she has to load all the plants, and it might be
Right.
just too much, but if she was gonna drive all the way over here, and I think she wanted to spend a couple hours. She
Yeah.
got a copy of all of my 8 articles, which has
Yeah.
kind of made me nervous. I hope I didn't say anything wrong. But anyway, I look forward to meeting with her, and I really am confident that we have the right person. Several people have come up to me and said, "Oh, I've got a great person," and it's always Charlene Johnson. So I believe we've got the right person, and I'm excited.
So Mary, do you envision her giving kind of the same talk that she gave last night in James Island? That is what you kind of
When she does a
foresee-
seminar?
Yes, similar, I mean, it would be a
Yes.
similar,
She has got, I mean, she obviously does this all the time, and she knows exactly what she's talking about. We could have her tailor it to our climate. I mean, I guess people on the Isle of Palms, they don't all have just sand yards, it wouldn't have to be
Right.
just what grows on the beach. But she has all these PowerPoints, all these pictures, and I think she could do a really good job. And we could ask her if she thinks one seminar would do it, or if she would prefer to break it up and do a couple.
yeah, I
2
kind
or
of didn't know if
3.
it would be like a series that she would, if she'd prefer to do kind of a one-time thing, or if she would do a series.
Perhaps she
or-
could do an introductory one, and we could see how much
See how that goes.
interest there is, how many people show up at the rec center to hear her. We could certainly put signs on the door, so those of us who go to classes there will see,
Yeah.
and put a notice in the Island Eye, and
Have Chandra publicize it on social media.
yeah, I hope it is successful.
And we're generally thinking March would be would be the seminar.
No,
with-
February.
Or February would be the seminar.
In
March would be-
anticipation of the season beginning when you want to plant things in March.
In March, okay.
Yeah. Of course, there are things that she said last night that should be planted in October, so
Okay.
it's,
Can kind of start at any point,
Yeah.
I guess.
yeah. But I think she really knows the best things to do, and I hope people will be receptive to it.
Yeah.
Mary, I'm assuming that in her presentation, she talked about the benefits to a large degree of native plants.
Yes, the title of her
Right.
program was a Gardening for Wildlife.
Okay,
So there was a
okay.
lot about insects and how important insects are.
Right. I just wouldn't want people to think we're just talking about pretty flowers, because
Yeah,
that's really not
this
what
was-
it's about.
This was geared toward insects, birds, all the pollinators,
Right.
and they had, you drew a ticket and you won a thing of, with a caterpillar on it, of, I can't think of the plant, but anyway, they had all kinds of things, and it was all about animals and
Yeah.
insects. And she was talking about how important insects are as part of the ecological
Right.
world. I mean, we can't just get rid of all the insects by killing them. I mean, it all works together,
Sounds good.
While we're on wildlife, could I say that the last turtle nest hatched Sunday night? And we're looking at wrapping things up here now. Those poor little hatchlings, 59 of them came out and they got frozen. We found them looking dead. They never made it off the dune. They were just
Really?
upside down and like this. And it was because they were cold stunned. These are cold-blooded reptiles, and cold stunning is if they get below 60 degrees, they can't move. And so I remember this happened years ago, And what we did was we warmed them up, and sure enough, we warmed them up, and within an hour, they were charging around the bucket, just, let me out of here, let me out of here. The water was still 70 degrees, the air was 55 or so. So 3 of them had been killed by ants, and if we had just left them there
They
and
all
waited
would've
for the sun to warm them up, all of them would have been killed by ants. But anyway, we were able to release 56 or 7 of them out of that. And it was a small nest because it was late. It was late on August
what a good-
15th, and so.
Those are
What
the
a
kind of
great
times
happy
that
story.
make your job worthwhile,
It was
right?
great.
Peak
So
moment.
anyway, that was great.
That's fantastic.
And the other thing is kind of about wildlife and kind of about water sampling. For 22 years, I've been taking phytoplankton water samples off of Sea Cabins Pier. And I decided, and that's for NOAA, that's not fecal coliform, that's looking for harmful algae blooms. And I decided after 22 years, it was time for somebody else to take a turn. I was getting tired, although it is an interesting thing to do. So I sent out a question to 133 turtle volunteers saying, hey, who wants to do this? It helps turtles, and it helps birds, and it helps wildlife as well. Even though I've never found a harmful algae bloom, I have found blooms of species of dinoflagellates that were not dangerous, but still it was kind of, now, why is there so much rhizoselenia out there all of a sudden? But anyway, and for 10 years or so, we sampled off in Hamlin Creek as well. But lately, NOAA has said, just do the pier. So anyway, I did find 2 people, well, actually 3 people. Todd Murphy, who lives at Pelican's Reach in Wild Dunes, is going to do it, and Linda and Jeff Forsland, who live on Forest Trail, are going to train to know how to take the sample, how to read the sample, and how to submit it to NOAA and identify everything they see. I'm giving them an old microscope that my husband used in medical school. If anybody has an old microscope that you want to donate to one of them, please let me know.
I just gave mine away, Mary.
Deb?
But somebody
You
would
can
buy
still
one
find
for
it at
us.
Goodwill, right?
Yeah.
Been a
No,
banner
it's
month for you, Mary.
no, I gave it to somebody
It's
that's
been a
going to
banner
use it,
month.
yeah.
Rescuing the turtles and
Well,
finding
you
someone to
know.
help with sampling.
Yeah.
So I know that there was some question about whether or not there was going to be continued funding for the work that, that's been done
Oh,
with the
the
turtles.
genetics. We
Yeah.
got in fact, the next Island Eye is going to be about the GoFundMe in my name and to benefit Brian Shamblin. And a picture of Brian will be in and I took it to the candidates forum, a jar saying, please help turtles by contributing to the genetics funding. The federal funds have been lost, and all the turtle people all up and down the coast are trying to raise money. So that's going to be in the Island Eye with the link to go to GoFundMe and donate. So I hope that'll help with that. We put a pretty high goal on there, and we're nowhere near it. But we figured, shoot for the moon. Maybe we'll get something. Yeah, thanks for asking about that.
Okay. And I think next we wanted to talk a little bit about tree pruning. This was something that both Doug and I were interested in speaking about because it's come to our attention through various individuals that our live oak trees, while not being cut down, are being severely pruned. And the technique that we're seeing used a lot is something that's called lion tailing, which I had never heard about until I started looking into it. So the way that the tree is pruned is that rather than having your live oak canopy be in the shape of kind of an umbrella, it is shaped to kind of mimic what would be like a lion's tail. So your trunk of your tree and then a little bit of foliage at the top, kind of in the very center of the tree. And it's quite unattractive. But I think it is, some people have used that because maybe there's a limb that hangs over their pool or their deck, and they're trying to keep debris out of the pool. And so that's one way to do it, is to get rid of those branches that are coming out in, other directions other than just straight up. So so I've noticed the technique on the street where I live, and I've also been contacted by a resident in Wild Dunes whose homeowners association hired a company to come in and do the tree trimming, and it was the same type of trimming. And I think she was the one that first alerted me to that term, lion tailing. But that was what was used by the in Wild Dunes, and I think it could potentially be the same group of individuals, because the person that I spoke to in my neighborhood mentioned that he did a lot of work in Wild Dunes. But my question is, I know we have tree ordinances that are related to removal of protected trees, and to kind of outline what kind of trees you can remove without having to have a permit and what you do need a permit for. Is there anything that addresses the trimming or severe pruning of trees?
There is the ANSI A300 standard is the kind of generally accepted pruning standard, and we have it in our code adopted by reference. And any tree that is cut out of compliance of that tree, out of compliance with that standard, it is considered the same thing as removal of the tree. So we do have a pruning standard included in the city's code. The problem that we run into is we don't require permits for pruning. People are pruning every day, and you'll hear arborists tell you that it's good for trees to be pruned. But the problem is when somebody goes too far and they've pruned too much, they're typically kind of gone. We become aware of it later, and it's very hard for us to administer after the fact. So we deal with it, and I don't know that it's frequent. Matt is really at the forefront of that now, and it's probably 3-4 times a year, something like that. We try our best, and specifically lion tailing is identified in that standard as something that you shouldn't, that's not compliant. And I actually think of lion tailing and as I've been told, I think of it as you have a complete canopy that wants to be completely full of foliage, and there is a technique that leaves just a pom-pom at the end of each branch. So instead of a
Right.
complete canopy, you have these little,
Yeah.
but it has the effect of removing all of the foliage inside, so it makes it very clean looking. And some people are drawn to that kind of clean looking. We've even had arborists tell us that technique is better in windy environments because it's not catching as much of the wind, so that the tree is kind of more aerodynamic. So we get a lot of experts having a lot of differences of opinion about lion tailing. End of the day, there are a lot of places that appreciate how it looks. So when we see it, we try to identify who did the work. We then notify them, and send them the standard and say, hey, lion tailing is not allowed. And we kind of do the best we can.
But they can't be fined after the fact or anything like that for doing it?
If
'cause it's a
we
suggestion.
found somebody who was consistently doing it or doing it to a level that truly was going to kill the tree, and it was more than just an aesthetic kind of choice, we would. We never have, but we legally could. I don't know that we've ever had somebody that we knew was doing it, that we've told them to stop that practice, and they didn't stop. We've never had a repeat offender that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I had hired a tree person to come out and do some pruning, and they actually said to me they can only do up to a certain amount of the canopy and
Right.
certain things because of the ordinances that are, or the regs. I think a lot of it, And we just witnessed it happens, on the new buildings in the clear cuts, or when people aren't add additions, they're just whoosh,
Right.
get it out of the way.
Yeah, and that, removing significant portions of the tree, and we struggle with this in the permitting of structures where that owner is generally entitled to do additions to their house. We try to find the balance between not removing the tree, and that's why we do typically involve an arborist, where they will tell us, this would be a satisfactory level of pruning. If they prune to this level, we don't think it'll harm the tree. And they try to intentionally shape the tree away from a planned structure. Now, a lot of times it will happen that we have an arborist up front. We go through a long kind of drawn out process of how that tree is going to be protected, what pruning cuts are going to be made. And just kind of by its very nature, people with chainsaws can just get carried away. We see it a ton where we spend
Yeah.
months sometimes going over what should happen, what can happen. And then at the final hour, a young kid with a chainsaw shows up and goes crazier than we would hope and we would expect. So it's a enforcement challenge. We do the best we can without, we obviously can't be there on each site with each pruning, but we do the best we can to kind of manage that. But it is, the ANSI A300 standard is incorporated into our code, and we do reference it a lot. And conscientious companies that have been out here doing tree work for a long time, we really don't have trouble. It's when the new person shows up and
Could you?
we have fine
Could you
people.
do something like licensing, like we have tree pruners have to get licensed to cut trees on the island? And then you give out a list of all the people who have got the licenses to do the work? I'm just.
I don't think so. I don't think you, that would be
And you've
like,
been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. There
Everybody will always
are-
find a way around everything, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, it is included in our code that in that situation that I described where a building is going to be close to a tree, that requires a certified arborist.
Okay.
We even find though that, there are certified arborists who, from our perspective, like I mentioned, that they will kind of make this case that lion tailing's good for the trees, even though the standard says it's not. We have good and not so good licensed arborists. It's kind of
It's
a
like
mixed bag,
Plumbers, electricians, you're gonna have
kind of
You're gonna have a
yeah.
bell curve, right?
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
And I
It's
think
life.
there's a low barrier of entry to that line of work. So we do get a lot of kind of kids, got a chainsaw for Christmas, and they're gonna open up their first business, and it's out here cutting trees. So there is a kind of constant
So
headache with that.
So people can be fined for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they cut too much, they can be fined.
But you would have to have some type of documentation before and after?
Yes,
The
I mean,
training?
that is the challenge, that if somebody shows up, unless it's, we have shown up and it's been completely gone, like there's just a single trunk. We've shown up and it's mid-cutting and you can see the pile on the ground. So kind of depending on when we get involved, it could have challenges to
So
enforcing it.
to your question, what's the magnitude of a fine? If
It
this-
can be, if you have pruned to a point that qualifies as a full removal, you have to replace the tree with the largest tree commercially available in the state. Largest tree that we found is
24 inches.
24 inches.
Ooh, that's a big one.
$32,000.
So it can quickly get into,
That's an ouch.
Yeah.
That $75 citation, that's a real ouch.
yeah,
It's gonna cut into, if you're a builder, your profitability. If
We
you're a
can't get
homeowner,
around it by
that
just
hurts.
putting little trees on the side.
That's
Has to
correct.
be a big one.
If it's a big tree that got removed, then yes, it is a costly thing, and
And is it the contractor that was hired or the homeowner that pays the fine?
we it's been handled both ways. It's been, it has been handled both ways. I don't know if you all have tracked, I mean, we have had a case that should be now settled, but it's been going on for 10 years that,
On Carolina Boulevard?
yep,
Yeah.
10 years?
10 years, hundreds of
Wow.
thousands of dollars,
Wow.
jail time.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it,
Yeah,
we've had, it's been there have been large payments made. I mean, it's a costly ordinance to kind of mess around with. It's a heavy hammer at the end of that one. And people do, I do think by and large, people know that, they're conscientious of it, but still, you know, with as many trees that get pruned on the island each year as that happens, again, probably 3-4 times a year, we run into problems.
And that's mostly with the live oaks or the water oaks, or what other types of trees?
The
are-
pruning is really,
Because
I'd say
obviously
exclusively
palmetto
live oaks.
trees are carrot topped every year.
Yeah. Live oaks.
So it's mostly the oaks.
Live oaks.
yeah.
In particular.
Yeah, we have removals. I mean, we have also a handful of trees that get removed without permits each year that results in a citation. Or, from my perspective, the most common one of those is palm trees. People think that they're not protected for whatever reason.
Yeah, what is that? That's true.
People remove and.
They don't
and-
think of them as a traditional hardwood, I think. is
Right.
what, yeah.
And I think they might be excluded in most communities, so I think they're kind of surprised when they, so that seems to be,
Palms.
we are the Isle of
protect
Palms. It seems like
palms.
they would assume that they would be protected out here, but that happens several times a year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next, we have litter, and I wanted to follow up with the group on the litter issue, in particular to the butt canisters. I had been in touch with Robert Acero, I hope I said that correctly, because he was, in our last communication, searching for a contractor to empty the butt canisters, and I'm assuming that this contractor would be doing other things as well as emptying the butt canisters?
Well, the contractor he reached out to is the city's existing, they hold the existing contract for
Right.
kind of all of our landscaping. So,
Okay.
yeah, they do work for the city around the entire city, on beach paths, on Front Beach, our parks, our properties proper, so, yeah, they're
Are
kind
they
of.
taking care of the turtle signs? I'm always pulling vines down off of them. The vines are trying to cover them up. I just
I don't
thought I'd
think so.
mention that.
I
Probably
think
not.
that Robert's group does the beach paths, but
I
I
do
think
see
that's,
them coming and cutting
think
in
it's
front of my
pretty-
house in the path.
yeah, I think that's pretty sporadic.
Yeah.
Probably not as quickly as those vines grow.
I guess the vines are going to
Yeah.
be killed by the cold anyway,
Yeah.
but still.
So the Robert sent me a copy of the contract, and the contract for the butt canisters was $4,727.25.
Just for the butt canisters?
4,000?
Yeah.
For a year, that's a
Yeah,
year, right?
I offered to do it for 4,000 instead.
Oh, my gosh. And they're
Yeah.
only in like 2 or 3 places, right?
I think there are like 4 or 5 of them, right?
But still,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
still.
Yeah, which is.
Front Beach and then the marina. There's several at Front Beach.
And there's one at the marina. And
Yes.
I cannot find the one at the marina. People keep sending me pictures of that, and I can't.
So it's right at the community dock.
Okay.
So the dock that's to the farthest left, kind of adjacent to the ditch.
Okay, all right. So I don't think that this contract was accepted, is that?
No,
Yeah.
no, Robert. We're gonna find an alternative. I mean, there was a staff member doing it, something happened with that staff member, kind of fell through their cracks. Then Robert, I mean, has got a million hats that he wears, and so
Oh,
it fell
for
through
sure, yeah.
cracks with him, so it's just a challenge of having,
Is that
A
something we
dedicated-
could ask to get in the circle of community service when people are I don't know if we have many people arrested or get community service
I
for
don't think we
breaking
can
the
do
law
that.
out
You
here.
can't do that anymore. That's a thing of the past,
Yeah.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, you have to carry a really big insurance policy to do that.
Oh, my
Okay, so now-
gosh.
And then someone has to
um,
watch them the whole
yeah.
time, too.
We can advise people to go out. If they do offer it, they can go to other places and bring us back their hours, but we don't do it here.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good to know.
One thing that has come to my attention, and this was through an email from Susan Smith, is that the people who, in the Charleston chapter of the Surfriders Foundation are aware, her name is Becky Sheftal, that the canisters are not being emptied properly. And they expressed some concerns about that because they have their name on the plaque, their Surfrider Foundation canister, it's excuse me, advertised as a Surfrider Foundation canister. And so they did have some concerns about that, them not being emptied and taken care of as they should. And I thought that they had a good point with regards to that. And I realized Robert just does the work of many people. And I'm totally aware of that, but is there, where are we headed with this? Because this has been going on since about August, I think, is when I got my first picture.
Yeah. Well, we know that we need to find a solution. I mean, it could be if we just cannot manage with either our manpower or paying somebody to do it, I think the only option would be to remove them until we could get it worked out. But we're hopeful that we can get either, and probably what will happen is finding a cheaper person to do it. That's the plan.
How many are there? How many-
Five
4 or
or
5.
And they're all down by.
Yeah, you interested, Doug?
One in the marina.
I'll invoice you $20 a bucket once a week.
At $20, we would take it. $20 a bucket.
But, no, I just wanted to get an idea of the magnitude, and it's
I
focused
did,
around the.
Sandy, I thought that, I guess I was thinking that they were not Surf Rider.
Oh, yeah, no, they are.
All of them are?
Well, they have the Surfrider sign. They were affixed to the Surfrider sign.
Okay.
So the canister itself doesn't have, we didn't purchase that from the guy that typically does
Okay.
them for
They had the
Surfrider.
sign.
We purchased the canister, which is just a little black tube.
Yeah,
We
but
purchased
it's on
that
the
through a
sign.
different source, but then that's affixed to the Surfrider sign. Yeah,
Okay, I forgot that. I was
Yeah.
thinking that we didn't
right.
buy them from them.
So I do have some Allen wrenches, and I could put them on my keychain, and
You could do it for a fee? I mean, this is a good, just kind of lesson of, and I know that we all want to do more, but, and Mary talking about water testing. The city staff is a very thin, lean operation. We don't have endless money and people raise their eyebrows if it's $5,000 to undo a few Allen keys. So it
I
is
can
just
see
a
that, yeah.
challenge it's a challenge that we
Yeah.
face with all little tasks that seem so little. It takes tremendous effort to even get it organized, to get it done.
How
Without,
often do we want these things replaced?
I think weekly, I think is the, I think that's
I
the-
think weekly.
yeah.
I'll send you a
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah.
I'm semi-serious.
You want to do the non-filament
No, that's
recycling
it.
too?
But I mean, if it's 5 things and, we can volunteer or just something nominal,
Yeah,
just so we don't have to end a program that seems to be successful. Because people the smoking thing is just, I pass so many smokers on the beach. And my wife says I'm going to get shot one of these days, but I'll just say, excuse me, I don't know if you know, but it's a kid. I don't tell them not stop smoking. I say, I don't know if you know, but this is a smoke-free beach. And they just look at me and go, yeah, I know.
Yes,
I know.
what?
Yeah, so what is it?
What are you
Yeah.
gonna do about it?
Yeah, But anyway, yeah, let's figure something
and
out.
I do know that, kind of related, that Susan has been making the case and makes a compelling case that, the beach is enjoyed widely and frequently by, and it's our kind of crown jewel, to have a completely voluntary staff dedicated to keeping that public asset clean is asking a lot of volunteers. So the idea of, and we've been talking about the fact that we're not going to have BSOs doing parking next year, and that there would be, we won't have as many BSOs, but there would be kind of hands available next summer. But, you know, it's a tremendous amount of work that Susan's group does. Is that sustainable? I mean, can she keep an army of volunteers going for ever and ever, or should it be rolled into a contract like the landscaping that, you know, once it gets an established a company with a contract and they're just doing it, it does obviously simplify. And I think she's advocated that all of that cleanup, or at least a significant amount of that cleanup, should be rolled into the city's budget
yeah.
as a cleanup contract. It would be expensive. I mean, it's 40 people, I think, for several hours a week. I mean, it would be an expensive contract, but I think she makes the case that it's really something that the city should be doing. And I think
There are
that'll be
probably a lot of
considered.
people that agree, and I was thinking I wouldn't want to put any more burden, because that group does an amazing job with just volunteers, and yay, Susan, really, for her leadership. But I wondered if there was a way to give a stipend to the Isle of Palms cleanup crew, some way the city could give a stipend to help with emptying the canisters and doing the work that they're doing, as opposed to going out and hire some
Yeah, I mean, there's three ways,
external.
there's three ways this goes, right? Is they continue to do it, by grace of God, they continue to volunteer to do it, or they stop and the beaches start to look
Get
like
messy.
absolute a mess. Then you're gonna start getting phone calls, and then you're gonna want, so, I mean, if there is a way to incentivize or encourage the volunteer program to continue, I think that's a great idea. And I-
Well, I think one of the things about the Surfrider Foundation is that one of their requirements is that you have a dedicated person to do that, and I don't believe that would be a volunteer,
Right.
yeah. I mean, that's what
The
they ask
good news
for,
is
yeah.
the canisters are being used.
Well,
you
but-
know?
yeah.
Not every smoker, but the fact that they're filling up.
Well, that's the thing, and you
That's-
hate to take them away because they are being used.
Exactly. I mean, that at least encourages proper disposal.
Oh, before I forget, can I just do a quick sidebar? So I think this was fascinating. So we were doing some renovations inside our house. We were looking at countertops. And the woman we were talking with over at Melser Tile brings out glass and oyster countertops. And guess who they're from? And guess whose glass is in those
Wow,
things?
that is
Is that
very
cool?
That is full circle. All your beer bottles are going back into your account.
And
But is
wine,
that-
don't
is
forget
that-
the wine bottles.
I mean, I really
We
felt like,
represent.
you know,
And
we
Linda's wine bottles.
we are starting, you know, our glass is gonna be inside. I thought that was
That's
so
pretty
cool. I
amazing.
just wanted to share.
Wonderful.
I almost
And the
forgot.
time period's been relatively short, too, since we engaged them.
I think
so
I'm
good
gonna,
report.
we're gonna look into one for, not the kitchen, but for when we redo the surface of the bar, we might get one just to
Yeah.
support the
Conversation
whole-
piece.
But again, I mean, that's really cool. I mean,
That is
so these
cool.
programs, if we get them up and running and they're working, we really want to figure out how to make them sustainable for the long term, is sort of what my
Yeah.
final comment is about that, because if we're collecting the cigarette butts, there's got to be a way to get these things emptied in a way where, you know, because we don't want to stop doing it, because
Yeah.
they're going to wind up on the ground. And we're exasperated, because now you need 42 volunteers to get all the extra cigarette butts on the ground. Anyway, back to the
Yeah, Thank
agenda.
you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Douglas, did you have an update on the sea level rise adaptation?
Just that we do have the company is engaged. We've now met with them, Seaman and Whiteside. They are setting a stakeholder meeting. You all have been put on the list of stakeholders. That will be, and I think it'll be a series of a couple of meetings initially to just gather input. They're going to meet with the Water and Sewer Commission. They're going to meet with the Wild Dunes Community Association, just kind of meet with various stakeholders to gather information, thoughts, ideas about, you know, where are we vulnerable, what have you seen, So that should be happening. It's a pretty quick window on the total project, so I think that they will be sometime here in the early winter engaging with this group. So it'd be interesting. That's going to be a good, interesting project that'll, should illuminate some things for us.
Under new business, is there any new business? I'm not.
I have a miscellaneous question for Douglas about what is the status of the sand scraping and all near Breach Inlet? Did that get finished?
Phase one was finished. We had thought and hoped that what was done initially would hold. We had one series of king tides with,
It got even worse.
and took away really all the work that was done, and then ate into the property even more. So we lost way more sand than we placed. So the tides have receded a bit, and we're now doing the kind of second phase of that, which now we've entered into a situation where we have houses that are as close as 20 feet to that erosional line. So the city council has approved sandbagging, placing sandbags in front of those properties. There's a stretch of about 10 properties that will have sandbags in front of them, kind of in critical condition. We have one more series of spring tides at end of October. So we're hopeful that the work that gets done now, between now and October 25th is the peak, that will survive that kind of unscathed. And then all of the tides from then until this Army Corps project should be a bit lower, and we think that we'll be in good shape. But so we're doing kind of this very short-term temporary work now. There is a very large-scale project planned for January and February, where the Army Corps of Engineers will be setting up a dredge in 2 of their spoil sites on the back of the island, pumping that material to the front side of the island, and then the city is going to scrape it up to the dune line. So kind of have a short temporary, and then we have, hopefully, in the near term, a long-range fix there. That is what is keeping us busy, City Hall. That's a ever-moving, it's a complex, and every day is a new day, and with that. So it's keeping us very busy, very occupied.
Yeah, I think Jordan
Oh,
had
yeah,
something
I
else
just
you wanted
had
to mention.
another comment to go back to the butt canisters. So I know this is something that my school does, and each year we are required to obtain at least 30 community service hours, and kind of the way that we obtain these hours is after we complete our activity, we get like a signature or something from somebody who's in charge of the activity or who kind of is leading the charge of what's going on. And I definitely think that for student outreach, I definitely think that there are plenty of people who, I mean, not just speaking for my school, but people who could be looking for community service opportunities and could use this as an opportunity to help our city, but also get something out of it as well, because they are getting their community service hours by helping, but they're also helping in a way that we can get rid of the waste for the canisters.
Do you know is there like a list at your school of various opportunities?
So there's ways that you can kind of advertise ideas. I could definitely, like, if that was something we wanted to do, I could reach out, because through each grade level, there's like a teacher, and we have our Canvas pages, and there's like community, for our study halls, like our focus. And so each page will, like, you can have opportunities for community service. Sometimes you can have announcements just go like throughout the whole school, so you can get multiple people.
That's cool.
But our school definitely revolves a lot about outside and community service, and I definitely think that if this is something that requires a lot of attention and there's not really much consideration for how much of a labor force we're going to have to address this problem, then I definitely think that this could be a solution.
It's a good idea.
How many from your school are out in this geographic area? I happen to know she goes to the same campus that my daughter goes to, so I know it's North Charleston. Are there a lot of kids from your school in this
Yes.
area?
If not on Isle of Palms, definitely in like close enough, like Mount Pleasant
That
area
they're
that
out
they
here
could.
frequently enough?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Do you think it could be on a routine schedule? I mean, part of the challenge with this
Is
is
because it's so frequent.
because
yeah.
it's frequent and it'll kind of fall between the cracks for
Mm-hmm.
a month and then it's overflowing.
I think if there was like a designated time or like a specific date, or we just gave time in advance for when, I
Kind of
definitely
said
think there
every
would.
Wednesday it had to be
Right.
done. They would
Yeah.
probably make that happen.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yes, it is.
Sounds like a win-win.
Well, and it might be something that could help until we have
A more
a
permanent.
more permanent
Kind of
solution,
solution, yeah.
because they wouldn't be doing that in the summertime, right?
That's good.
Typically?
No, but you can, I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I would get, I got all of my hours over the summer, so you still have, like, there's still the
There's still people
incentive
doing
to
that,
do
okay.
it when you're
Uh-huh.
not in school.
Okay.
And quite, the winter time is when our staff has kind of a break. And I do think that it's probably when the canisters are being less utilized. So really, our crunch time is the summer. So maybe that would be,
Yeah, if you needed me to do some advertising or like
So-
just send out stuff throughout the campus, I can. And then if not, if I think Magnet or Academic Magnet could prove as a successful testing site. And then if it works with
That's a good
kids
idea.
from our
Expand it
campus,
to
then you
other
can go to other
schools.
high
Yeah.
schools too, kind of test it out.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have time to explore this?
Yeah.
further? If we put it on the agenda to follow up
Yeah,
next,
follow
in
up.
Yeah,
November?
okay.
I can follow up with that.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Awesome.
And I
Thank
have
you.
study hall tomorrow, so I should be able to
Cool.
talk to my focus teacher and see what's going on.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Nice.
Exactly.
So speaking of next meeting, the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November the 9th at 4 o'clock. And I am going to be looking at wildlife in the Galapagos Islands at that time. So,
Jealous.
so wondering about
Yes or
the,
nay, bringing a motion to move the meeting to the Galapagos
Yes.
Islands?
so I was wondering about the availability of Dr. Plunkett.
Good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, plan to be here.
Okay, okay. I would be gone for 2 Thursdays, and so I just thought it would be easier to go
Okay.
ahead and keep the meeting as scheduled.
And we have
rather than trying to
Charlene
change.
is already scheduled, I think, right?
Yes,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
She's coming.
yeah.
And
That'd be great.
I will
All right.
actually be out of town next month too. I just realized that. So I can do Zoom though.
Okay.
I don't think I can do Zoom.
No, not in the Galapagos.
I mean, if you need a
No cell towers in the
contingency,
Galapagos. at all.
if you need a contingency, I would volunteer. If you're out, Linda's not available. I need
Okay,
someone.
all right, thank you, Doug. Okay, is there any other business for the meeting? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move the meeting be adjourned.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.